1,000 people, and Ilfracombe stories really want to decline in the 60s and 70s with the decline in tourism and our loss of rail and transport links that led to quite difficult deprivation within the town. So Ilfracombe, like many coastal towns, has got large Victorian houses, and in the sort of late 70s, early 80s, they began to get split up into HMOs, and they were providing cheap accommodation for people from outside the area and also within North Devon, and has become in recent years sort of a dumping ground, we say, for people that need accommodation that's low cost. And with that becomes a issue with a lot of people with complex needs and requirements that have found themselves in Ilfracombe. Coupled with that, with all the cuts that have been put in place with local services, Ilfracombe has quite a high number of people with complex needs and issues, but without the necessary facilities and services to help them. So we've battled with that for quite some time, and this has obviously led to quite some difficult acute and economic and social problems that's no secret in Ilfracombe. And I think the stat that we often roll out is the life expectancy in Ilfracombe compared to a place called Newton Popperford is like something like 15 years difference. So we sort of struggle with those issues. To tackle this, because there's a lot of, because even though that's sort of the background of the issue that sort of we're dealing with, Ilfracombe is a beautiful place, and Ilfracombe is definitely, since I've been working there in the past 8 to 10 years, definitely turning itself around. And obviously COVID hasn't helped with the situation, but we've certainly definitely been on an upward path of change in the town. And 8 years ago, One Ilfracombe was set up by the town council specifically to tackle these issues and work with people with the cohort of issues that we've sort of faced in Ilfracombe. And the idea was to break down the silo working of government agencies, look at pooling budgets, look at working together. And we've basically been on a journey for 8 years, and there's been many successes in One Ilfracombe, working together with agencies to address problems. So, we were one of the first towns to put in social prescribers in place to help and tackle some of the inequalities and work with people. And now the one system that has been now replicated across Northern Devon, with obviously One Northern Devon now. We've got One towns and communities in most places in North Devon now, so it's like a really sort of good news story. What I'll do now is just go on just to quickly say that we started working with Bell's Place because they've always provided some good voluntary services, working with the cohort of people. And One Ilfracombe thought that actually we can really help and support Bell's Place, and we've been working together for about 2 or 3 years, looking for funding to help them to deliver like a wide range of services. One of the services that they deliver is a Meals and More service, which now operates 5 days a week in the town. And obviously Carol will go on to say a bit more about that. But the CCG through down Halifax actually gave us Bell's Place £10,000 2 years ago to help extend the Meals and More service from 2 days a week to 5 days a week, which was vital, particularly because the fact that Bell's Place was only one of the agencies that was still running throughout COVID, and were able to support like a really difficult cohort of people actually still getting a hot meal every day. So Bell's Place has been vital during the pandemic. And from a One Ilfracombe point of view, and working with Bell's Place, we know that we need to find 18 grand a year roughly to keep Bell's Place going, and to keep the services that they deliver continuing. And with all the cuts that are happening, one of the again, another thing that's happening in Ilfracombe now, I'm not sure whether you're aware, but the link centres are now closing across Devon, and Ilfracombe's link centre is due to go. We've obviously got quite a high proportion of people with mental health issues. Bells Place obviously has a lot of those people through their door, but the demand on services that Bells Place actually provides is going to increase even more with these other pending cuts. But that was just a real sort of rough, quick shot of all the stuff. I could talk to you about the work that One Ilfracombe's done for absolutely hours, but I'll let Carol go on to tell you about all the good stuff that actually and what Bells Place do and the impacts that they have. So hand over to Carol.
Thank you. Morning everybody. I've written out a little report, so I'll have to read it because I won't remember everything otherwise. So I'm Carol Parkin. I'm the director and manager and dog's body of Bells Place, really. We've been running for 7 years now, and just evolved into what we're doing now, really. So Bells Place is a community hub. It's an independent food bank and hot meal drop-in. It's my intention to offer support and services to all our community. That's always been the priority. Not to be known just as a place for the vulnerable or those with difficulties. It's sort of my ethos is to promote inclusion and enable all to become valued members of the community, which I think is what we want for everyone. With this in mind, it allows me to offer varied support services and signposting. Everything's offered for free or on a donation basis if people can afford it. In the past, we've offered children's school holiday workshops with cooking courses, DJ workshops, first aid training, many, many more. During the summer holidays, we have a school uniform recycle service. Families will donate their outgrown uniforms, then we can offer these in our school uniform shop. Not only does this help families financially, it supports the environment with reusing and recycling. I currently support over 200 families with this. It's for all our local schools and all of the feeder communities for that as well. We host the family support group, originally organised by Scope to support families of children with additional needs. Unfortunately, due to financial cuts for Scope, they were unable to continue, but parents have continued it as a peer-led group. It's a really, really good service. They do training and have guest speakers in and things. It's really valuable. Alongside these services, I myself receive many calls and messages each day from local schools, other services, agencies, referring families and individuals for support. It is usually in the form of food parcels, clothing, furniture and equipment, especially for people that have moved into emergency accommodation. Sadly, I've seen a real big increase since sort of COVID restrictions have lifted of families fleeing domestic violence, and they seem to be being placed around here in our area. And I'm supporting at least 3 of those families at any one time. The Meals and More service offered from Bells Place is our largest area of support, and it's a service that has been generously supported by you guys in the past, as Steve said before. Meals and More offers a drop-in service 5 days per week. Although our service was restricted to takeaway during the lockdown and COVID restricted period, we still opened for 5 days a week. It was vital to continue and further develop a strong relationship with our users. The majority of people who use Meals and More lead very chaotic lives, with nearly all of them having dependency difficulties and struggles with their mental health. Although we don't see a large amount of street homeless, many live in HMOs and substandard accommodation. We see an average of 25 people per day and have close to 200 people on our register. Some we'll see daily, others more sporadically. We're able to offer a hot meal, food parcels, hygiene products, access to a shower, fresh clothing, and pretty much anything that people need, really. If we haven't got it, I usually know someone that has. Of course, these are all vital, but the biggest support is the relationships we have built. Being able to talk about their anxieties and worries, helping to bridge gaps in broken family relationships, not just by offering the use of a phone and Wi-Fi or laptops, but by giving the time to talk and discuss solutions and supporting our users' self-esteem and confidence. It's fantastic that now, together, our local drug and alcohol services are working on-site from Bells Place 2 full days a week, offering both appointments and drop-in opportunities. The combination of our supportive relationships developed at Bells Place and the services offered by Together will give our users the greatest chance of success. We are working closely with John Patton from the COVID vaccination outreach team and are currently in the process of offering our second bespoke vaccination session. Just last week, we were lucky to have the Hepatitis C Trust on site offering finger prick testing. Over 20 people were tested, and we look forward to welcoming Dan and his team back in the next few months. I'm fortunate to have established strong links with many other services and agencies, allowing me to signpost effectively. It is vital for me to continue to develop links to other agencies and services to best serve Bell's Place in our community. I've sort of mentioned lots of we's and ours, but really is me. I'm lucky to have some great volunteers to help during the Meals and More sessions, but it's becoming increasingly difficult to attract new volunteers, and my fear is those who remain and will become burnt out. Everything else involved in running a busy and important service is done by me: admin, cleaning, maintenance, delivering, collecting, ordering, safeguarding, all those things on the list and more. As with many other services, the biggest headache is me having to find funding. It costs £18,000 per year to run Bell's Place. That includes my very minimum wage. I feel that we're offering a great, fantastic value for money, but without the support of Steve and One Ilfracombe, I would really struggle to find the time to secure this funding. We're currently short by £15,000 to cover our running costs for the next 12 months. I urge you or anyone you may know to consider us if there is any funding opportunities available. Looking to the future, obviously the steps forward we look for within our users are tiny. For example, one user drinks 1 can less per day when we're open. That's sort of where we're at, really. I consider that a success. Our local police force have found that there is less antisocial behaviour when we're open. I found that our users will either never see or even register with a GP, or, on the other hand, will want appointments every day. It has been shown that by establishing a good relationship, we're able to alleviate anxieties regarding medical concerns and hopefully reduce GP hospital appointments, or, on the other hand, encourage seeking medical attention when and where appropriate. I have concerns about the mental health services available, in particular with the current uncertainty regarding our local link service. I'm currently in discussion with our local college to look at the opportunities for psychology and counselling students having their placements at Bell's Place and offering therapies to our users. Finally, a huge problem that's developed for our users is dental care. I hope there are some plans in the future somewhere that people will be able to access appropriate dental care. It has a real impact on our users. Many are in chronic pain, and the use of illegally obtained, prescribed and illegal drugs is common. Many are unable to eat, and this does affect their overall health. Age doesn't seem to be any indicator of dental problems with our users, and there's a real impact on their confidence as well because of tooth loss and decay. I hope this has given you an insight into Bell's Place, and in particular our Meals and More sessions. You'd be very welcome to pop in if you're in the area, but I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you. No.
Thank you, Carol and Steve. It certainly sounds like a really dynamic community-based organisation. I've got a number of hands up. Judy first.
I don't have a question. I think you're amazing, and I just want to say that. And I think that we should try and clone you or find a way to bottle your essence. As a non-executive director, I don't exactly know what our funding arrangements are supporting initiatives like yours, but I think anything that keeps somebody at home rather than ending up dependent on the system is a really important initiative. So thank you very much, both.
Thank you.
Thanks, Judy. Graham, and then Charlotte.
Yeah, thank you, Carol and Steve, for talking to us. This is a long-standing problem, isn't it? Like many seaside resorts that suffer social and economic issues, unemployment, physical degeneration, drug and alcohol issues, and so on. I don't need to list them all, you know them all. I was actually invited to Ilfracombe in the 1990s to look at some of the issues that were going on. At that point, Prince Charles was there with the Prince's Trust, and there was the Civic Trust, and everything was going to be regenerated and wonderful. And lots of good work was done. But these are really big, I think the sexy word these days is wicked issues. And I know that the county council, the district council, the town council, the health authorities, voluntary groups, third sector have been working for years, decades, to try and do to get regeneration. And the work you're doing is a fantastic example of that. So my question is, you know, if we could walk into Ilfracombe next Monday morning and change one thing or three things, what would it be? What's really needed to turn around the fortunes of the town? And I know probably it would be to move it 100 miles nearer the tourists who want to visit it and reopen the railway and put some new hotels in it and so on. But we can't do that. So what's the one key thing that's going to pull up the town by its bootstraps?
I'll give that to you, Steve. You've got more insight to the whole of the town. I've got a particular area.
It's a really good question because it depends on which and how you look at it. So one of the issues that we've been working with North Devon Council, and it's been an ongoing issue, is about the licensing of HMOs.
Yeah.
About the way the sort of North Devon Council, and not just directing at North Devon Council, but one of the people that send a lot of people our way is the fact that that there are these HMOs, they're not licensed, they're looking at ways that can they license them. It's very difficult, it gets political. There's a lot of councillors that are landlords, you've heard it all before, they don't like some of the things that come in, and so you sort of get this turgid circle of people living in accommodation that just instantly is not just good for their well-being. Yeah. I think, you know, if we could tackle that and how that was arranged, that would be a huge issue. And I guess the other thing that we need is probably more focused services. We get offered pots of things when it becomes fashionable that, you know, this is like, for example, Active Devon at the moment. They've been really good to us. They've offered quite a lot of money to run courses and stuff, but at some point their funding will go dry because they'll not become the flavour of the month, and then there'll be some other organisation that is now the flavour of the month, and they will then give us some money. So I'm constantly on this like hamster wheel of chasing the funding. And even though we've got really clear sort of a vision of how we can repair these things, and the community have told us this, and the people that Carol does a lot of work with will say, you know, this is what we need, but we're just constantly chasing this funding that then jumps from one place to another to then put sort of sticking plasters on. Yeah, and it sort of gets to the case where I'll write a report for £500, but I know that, you know, it'll take me 2 or 3 days to get all the statistics and stuff, and I know we can copy and paste and you can sort of articulate in different ways, but we're essentially just beg, stealing and borrowing £500 here, £1,000 here, and then giving it to Carol then to keep, because if
down for another month or so, isn't it? Yeah, it's very much like that.
That's really helpful, Steve and Carol, and Nick, I know you've got other people who want to speak, so I'll be brief. I absolutely endorse everything Steve's just said. For those who don't know the lingo, HMOs are houses in multiple occupation. You might call them bedsits, very often occupied by people who are quite transient. They move in, they move out, they don't register with GPs, and so on. They're not on the census. And Steve's absolutely right, we need to tackle that. And there are some councils who've been pretty good at doing that, and it sounds like your authority could learn from some others. And in terms of funding, again, Carol mentioned how difficult it is to continue to attract, to recruit volunteers and others. People need to know that organisations like this have got a long-term future, that they can put their shoulder behind the wheel and that it's not going to collapse. So long-term funding and a certain future is absolutely crucial to these initiatives. Thank you both very much.
Thanks, Graham. I've got Charlotte, then Joe, then John Walmsley. Charlotte.
Thanks. Thanks, Carol. Thanks, Steve, and thank you for the work you do. It's so important. And you don't have a massive support organisation behind you like a lot of our services do. So you're dealing with really people with really complex challenges, and yet you don't have that support. So I think that's something to note for us as well to consider. I think there is more we can do. I always think this in terms of commissioning the voluntary sector rather than giving them peanut handout of grants, where we know that these services that are provided are so vital. So I think it does come back to us challenging ourselves around our investment. We often talk about some of the other services, how we can't just solve the problem with fund, little bit more funding. It's about a workforce issue. Yet here is someone telling us, a lot of their problems is effectively, in relative terms, not very much money. And I know we can't just make exceptions for one organisation, but then this is about thinking, how do we effectively engage as a going forward an integrated health system, care system? How are we going to effectively invest in organizations across our system that deliver the priorities that we need? Health equities here being really clear, lots of number of things being dealt with in terms of this service, but multiple others that we've heard of, lots of examples over the last couple of years of organizations like yourselves doing this work. And yet, again, they're just, relying on, pockets of, bits of funding from here and there, rather than really being part of the serious conversation about how investment can be, channeled in partnership and working with them. So my plea is back to kind of, the bigger picture around commissioning and why we still have to have these conversations. That there is never any kind of serious investment thought in terms of the commissioning strategy for organisations such as the one Carol is leading. So that's enough of me. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Charlotte. Joe, Carol.
Yeah, thanks, Nick, and thanks, Carol and Steve. It's really good to hear about the fantastic work that you're doing. I suppose I just wanted to give you, I'm not able to give you all the answers here, but my I should say my role is Director of Commissioning for Active Hospital Services, so very much focusing on what happens in the community outside of the acute providers. And one of the bits of work that we're doing at the moment is co-creating our strategy for what does that home offer look like, that offer in the community that sits outside of hospital. And one of the things that will be a big focus, and we've been working with Darren Halifax, who's obviously our engagement lead with the voluntary sector, is how do we commission, just as Charlotte says, in a much more of a strategic way around the voluntary sector, and how do we give long-term commitment support and a better understanding of what it is we want to commission from the voluntary sector. So we're doing that piece of work at the moment. So we're working with people to kind of co-create that, and I think that will give us a really good framework in terms of actually understanding what it is that we want to work with the voluntary sector on, what is it we want to commission, and the framework to do it. I think that we've got a really good example at the moment of where I think commissioning has taken a big step forward in this area, and that's in mental health. So the community mental health framework, we're currently out at the moment to commission an alliance approach across Devon, but with a focus on locality and place, to work with multiple voluntary sector organisations, but under a sort of alliance umbrella, which gives us a kind of structure to do that and give some support to those organisations. And I don't wonder if listening to you now, that's a framework that we would want to roll out across various areas within Devon, not just for mental health. So I think that's a positive thing that we can take from this and then work on as we move forward.
That sounds really positive, Joe. Thank you. I've got John Walmsley and then Gaynor, please.
Thanks. It's lovely to see you, Carol. And I'm a director of One North Procurement, as you know, and I chair One Northern Devon. And I know you're doing fantastic work. I'm just going to go back to Graham's question to you, and just point out that the needs and the answers for Graham's question in every town is different. And that's really important. And so for me, the answer lies in empowering and enabling local communities to say what is wrong, to say what they need, and for us to stop telling people what the best answer is and to listen and hear what they say is best for their communities. So if I was dramatic, I would say I would abolish the NHS, at least the term NHS, and I would reconstitute it as not a national health service, but a national health and well-being service. And I think actually the positive encouraging news is that the NHS is becoming a national health and well-being service. And what Joe was saying there is absolutely correct, that the NHS is reaching out into all these other areas. But we've heard time and time again that the real challenge at the moment is that we have lots of people who are volunteering and willing to help deliver these services, but funding is a significant issue. And we can have lots of fine words, but I know that day in, day out, week in, week out, month in, month out, I'm aware of really good people spend all their time looking for funding rather than helping develop these services that would help. So I would love to see that the NHS, or our National Health and Wellbeing Service, actually invests 1% of the allocated available funding to these sorts of initiatives, so that we have to stop scrubbling around for funding all the time and can get down to doing the really useful work that will stop people needing to go to A&E. It will stop people falling over at home. It'll stop people getting lonely at home and being at risk of heart disease, which loneliness is a bigger risk of cardiovascular disease than smoking. So we need to stop the fine words and to actually invest in these sorts of initiatives that Carol's running and that are running all over Northern Devon and all over Britain. Actually, we just need to help them out. So that's all I'm going to say. A National Health and Wellbeing Service would be my answer to these problems, and allocate and invest a proper amount of funding. Thank you.
Thanks, John. I've got Gaynor, and then we must move on, I'm afraid.
Yeah, just very briefly, Carol and Steve, it's absolutely fantastic work what you're doing. I'm an occupational therapist. I've worked for, services that have supported these people, and they're not commissioned anymore. I know a lot of these people, they've got mental health issues, but they've also got drugs and alcohol issues. So the two services won't see them because they've got to sort out one before the other, and you hold that gap. And it's so important that we look at this, and as part of the out of hospital strategy, I'd really love to see that this is commissioned. These services are commissioned across Devon. The fact that you said a success story is that somebody has drunk one can of beer less that day is a huge success, because that one can of beer that day extra might have sent them over the edge and they had ended up in A&E, and it's such a shortfall. So yeah. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Dana. Joe, did you want to come back on something, or is that a legacy hand?
No, I think it's down now, Nick.
Okay, thanks. Great. Judy, can you be quick, because we do need to move?
Really quick. That we have a report back to the next governing body for Joe to just, it was very helpful to hear what you said, Joe, but to just clarify how we're endeavouring to move forward on this issue along the lines that John was talking about. But I think Joe was indicating that's the way we're moving, so that we can, as a governing body, see how, as part of a whole health and well-being system, we are able to support people within the health funds that we get. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Judy. So, Carol and Steve, just thank you again for giving up your time this morning to tell us about what is clearly a really fantastic project in Ilfracombe, and please keep going, and we will do whatever we can to help you. So please keep in touch with us. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for your time. Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, so let's move on then to welcome and apologies for the formal part of the meeting, and questions from members of the public. So we've got quite a substantial number of apologies this month. Jane Milligan, who is been called to a number of fairly non-negotiable meetings, I think one with Ian Dodd and one with Chris Whitty. So both of those are names she could hardly refuse. Darren Alcorn, Sheila Roberts, Dame Susie Leather, Steve Brown and Glenys Atherton have all apologised also. Then we've got one question from the public. The question is from Mr. Peter Burrows, and it is as follows. At the moment, the current COVID-19 crisis is causing hospital admissions to be high and shows no sign of decreasing, if indeed it ever will in the near future. With the care homes running at full capacity and no extra bed capacity for those people who are waiting to be released into the community, surely now is the time to look at reopening some community hospitals to ease the pressure on admissions at general hospitals. Bearing in mind, it is a fact that people are more willing to work in hospitals than in care homes. So we've got a fairly detailed response. I don't think Mr. Burrows is joining us this morning. I'm just checking that. No, he hasn't. So Joe, will you email the response to him? I don't think there's any need for us to read it out at the meeting because it's a fairly long and detailed answer. So can I leave you to email that reply to him, please, Joe?
Yes, happy to do that. I think David's got his hand up because David actually did contribute quite significantly to the response. So I'll just pass over to David.
Okay, David, go ahead.
So I do think actually as a board we just need to challenge in public the thinking behind the question, because on the face of it seems extremely logical that we've reduced our community bed stock over the last 5 years and we are under pressure now. But I think it's really important just to say that moving resources from community into community hospitals, in other words, moving resources from keeping people in their own home and in their own bed to putting them in a community hospital bed, is the wrong direction of travel. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. One is we know that when people are in hospital, they tend to lose independence. Physiologically, they lose muscle mass. They tend to eat less well. They tend to lose motivation. And the chances of good rehabilitation from hospital are less good than good rehabilitation if they're in their own home. And the other thing is it's about how you use your resources. So if we move our resources from a community team where we help people to return to their own homes into a community hospital, all we're doing is we're moving the block down the road. So instead of the block to discharge being at the DGH, the block to discharge will be in the community hospital. So the system will just back up so that we'll fill our community hospital beds with long stays. Those people in long stays in a community hospital will lose independence and may never return home. So I just think that the principle of investing in community hospitals is the wrong one.
Thank you, David. I think we would all agree with that very articulate synopsis of the challenge that we face. Gaynor? I think you're on mute.
I haven't got my hand up.
Oh, right, sorry. It was on my screen. Okay, all right. Fine, thank you. In which case, we'll move on then. Does anyone have any new registers of interest they need to declare? No? Okay. In which case, we'll move on to the minutes of the 30th of September. I'll go through them as I usually do, page at a time, just for matters arising and matters accuracy. So shout if you want me to stop at any point. Page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Okay, everybody happy with the minutes? Great. Then we've got a couple of actions. One is the Children's Services Review and Waiting Times update. Joe, you're asking for that to be closed. Is everybody happy with the progress as stated there?
So sorry, Nick. So the action was that we would bring back some information here today for information which is on the agenda, which will just hopefully give some people assurance that we're making progress. But the actual review itself will come back in January, so it is timetabled on the governing board agenda for January.
Okay, great, thank you. And then the other one is not due to report to us until, sorry, is due to report to us today, but we've had nothing from Sheila, so we'll have to keep that open until next month. Okay, that takes us on to the chair's report.
Nick, I think Alison Wilkinson's got her hand up. She's deputising for Sheila today. Okay,
go on, Alison.
Sorry, hi Nick. Yeah, just to say, I wasn't actually aware of the action, but I have looked into it, and I think the area you were talking about is around the health of the ICS, sort of high level outcomes, and I think they were identified as data sets that we actually need to try to collect, but at the moment we don't have the data available. But we are undertaking, as part of the ICS development process, a review of the high level outcomes and indicators within the report. So when you see next month's report, hopefully that will have been rectified.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Alison. That's helpful. Okay, that takes us on to the clinical chair's report. Paul is on leave, so if anyone has any questions, we can try and answer them. Does anyone have any questions on the report? No. Simon?
Yeah, Nick, I was just wondering that I think Paul mentions the urgent care summit in there somewhere. I just wondered if we could see some of the output of the actions that are going to be taken as a result of that. I had asked for that from before, but I haven't actually seen those yet. So I just wonder whether we could circulate those around.
I'll cover that in the AO report, Nick.
Okay, great. Thanks, Simon. All right. Any other questions on the chair's report? In which case, let's move on then to the AO's report. Simon, please.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. So as you know, Jane's given her apologies, so I'll present this today. So happy to take questions on the report, but there are a couple of things I just wanted to bring to the governing body's attention. So the first one, which is slightly in response to Simon's question. So we have received a letter, as have all trusts, from Pauline Phillip and Stephen Powis, the National Medical Director and the National Lead for Urgent Care, about ambulance handovers and the expectation that these will be eradicated, and asking for action plans from each of the trusts as well as us as a system. As Simon mentioned 2 weeks ago, we held an urgent care summit with all senior leaders from across the patch. There were a number of notable absences that we didn't invite to that. I think in error didn't invite to that summit, which will be rectified at our next one, which will be in about a month's time. There are a series of actions, Simon, which we are intending to present back to the governing body at our development session next week. I can also say on that that we are now having a winter task force. We are hopeful that we've secured very senior leadership for that across the system, and I'll be able to report hopefully on that next Thursday as well. The other thing I was just going to draw out, in addition to the report that Jane has submitted, is around the pressure on GP practices. So most people will have seen in the media that there has been a letter from NHS England and improvement to GP practices that are around the Winter Access Fund and other things, which has not landed terribly well. And again, that's probably understating that in terms of media response and response from the BMA and other colleagues. We are working with our local LMC to try to have a partnership approach to how we can make this best work for our GP practices and our population. But it's very clear to all of us that the the current pressures that we're seeing in GP practices are starting to spill out into other work, such as support to community hospitals, such as support to prisons and other vulnerable areas. So there's a lot of work for us to do in this area. And as Nick mentioned earlier, one of the reasons Jane can't be here is she's got a meeting with Ian Dodge, the National Primary Care Director, this morning to try to discuss some of the issues. So happy to take questions. I may have to ask colleagues to help support, but I'll do what I can.
Okay, I've got Graham, please, and then Charlotte.
Thank you, Nick. Simon, a couple of questions, if I could. The first is really just me asking a question as Chair of Finance and Performance Committee. For reasons we all understand, there was no quality and performance report to the last committee, because I know Alison and others colleagues have been working really hard to try and get a new integrated report and working very hard to pull that together. So it wasn't possible to have a report. So it's pleasing to see in Jane's report there is some mention of performance, particularly around cancer and diagnostic weights and so on. So thank you for that. I just wanted to seek some assurance that perhaps at next month's Finance and Performance Committee and Governing Body, we'll be back to having full reports on quality and performance. So that's the first question. The second one, just very quickly, Jane mentions in the report the recovery support programme and the steering group. I wondered if it was possible for Governing Body members to see the minutes of those meetings to get some sense of what's being discussed and what the proposals are. Thank you.
So yes to both, Graham.
Okay, great. Thanks, Simon. I've got Charlotte, Simon Kerr, and then Lincoln, please. So Charlotte.
Yeah, it was about maternity services and the complexity. I suppose how concerned should we be? The complexity issue that's raised. I suppose understanding that in terms of, is that just because there's a workforce issue and therefore the complexity can't be dealt with? Is that also wider sort of training and support issue in terms of some of the complex issues? There is support and training needs around that, and it would be good to understand that, I suppose, in terms of meeting some of the Ocden requirements around that. And I suppose just the underlying kind of concern around, again, the kind of health equity issue. The induction of labour that's a recommendation also comes with kind of challenges in terms of the support that's needed around that to make sure you're not effectively just told you've been having, you're going to be induced, rather than actually the conversations, increases risk factors for those who are